Jack's from the land. The NFC seems to have a different front runner every season recently. Who's going to be the next hot team? It feels like it's the Lions this year. Last year, the Lions were kind of in that mode with the 49ers. It feels like it's the Lions and then maybe the 49ers this year. That's just visceral from my perspective, not based on betting odds or anything like that. I feel like the Lions are like, this is it for them, that this is the peak, and the next logical step is for them to get to the Super Bowl. But who knows? The Eagles, I think, will be a lot better than last year. The 49ers, as I mentioned, they'll continue to be the 49ers. The Rams may have some fight in them this year. The Buccaneers, they still have a chip on their shoulder because even though they won the division last year, nobody seems to care, and they managed to keep most of the team together. The Packers could be a lot better. So I don't think there's one clear team. That's the great thing about the NFL right now. There really aren't great, clear, obvious choices. And even the Chiefs, who've won 3 Super Bowls, it's not like they blow everybody out. I've said this multiple times recently. They make every game, every playoff game, especially interesting. Every Super Bowl, they're done. And they do the Undertaker thing and come back and win.
So, okay. I wanted to talk about this because it is an interesting question, who's the next hot team? And I do agree with what he said about right now in the NFL. It's just like, it does feel like anyone can take it. And I do wholeheartedly agree with that, which is what I also love about this season. That's why I'm so excited about this season, because I think it could be so many teams have a chance at winning. They just do. There's just no clear front runner. But what I wanted to emphasize, because this is what I think is pretty interesting, is that Detroit Lions, people are willing to actually put them at the top of the list, right? And say that they are a legit hot team. Because I think last season, right, 2 seasons ago at the end of the season, things started to get a little bit momentum, but people were still questioning what the heck is Jared Goff, who is Dan Campbell, and right, and then the fact that the Rams won their Super Bowl as soon as they got rid of Jared Goff, it was just like there wasn't a lot of positivity surrounding that franchise. And then they picked up some momentum, and then that led into this last season. And now they beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and people were stunned by that because they didn't think. The reason why that was such a big talked about moment is because people didn't think that the Lions were that special, that they had the ability to do that. And even then, people were still defending it and saying, oh, well, Travis Kelce didn't play, and Dan Campbell just caught everyone off guard with the going for it, with the fake punt and all of that. And, essentially, he had to just do everything he could just to barely beat the Chiefs. And I feel like throughout the season, outside of Detroit Lions fans, of course, who are obviously, and rightfully so, really high on the Lions, the general media never really saw them as a threat, right? There was more talk even about the Eagles, about the 49ers, maybe even the Rams once they kind of got healthy and righted the ship. And there just wasn't that legitimate sense that the Detroit Lions could win the Super Bowl. It was the even on the AFC side, it was more about the Ravens, the Chiefs, of course. And it was like, in a lot of ways, there was more excitement and attention on CJ Stroud and the Texans, which I get. He's a rookie. It was they kind of came out the gate and hit the ground running, but it just, the media momentum, I'll call it, did not seem to be very big with the Detroit Lions. And I found that weird because I started this channel and I started like seriously posting near the end of last season. I think it was around like November of last season or so, around like Thanksgiving time, around there. And I just remember being really high on Detroit Lions and just not seeing a lot of people mentioning it. Was like, it was seen as like a guarantee, depending on which media you were consuming, that it was going to be either the Cowboys, because people were super high on the Cowboys, which I kept saying was fool's gold, or it was the 49ers. And I get why the 49ers kind of got priority over that, because they obviously were a wildly consistent team, had been to a Super Bowl before in recent history. Shanahan has proven to be a great coach and all that. And the Detroit Lions were still very largely unproven. But there was just no confidence, and no one had the courage to say, hey, Detroit Lions can actually win. And a lot of people were even picking the Buccaneers to beating the Detroit Lions, which I thought was outrageous. And I try not to make predictions on this channel because I think predictions are just silly and dumb. I said I do not think the Buccaneers are going to win that game, and I think absolutely the Detroit Lions, and as well as the Lions versus the Rams as well. Majority of people have felt like, especially the media, felt like said that the Rams were going to beat the Lions. So it was just, everyone was just doubting the Lions game after game after game after game. And now it finally seems like, especially since they practically, pretty much had the 49ers beat, and they kind of beat themselves, that they're just like, wow, this team actually is officially for real. The narrative now turned into the Lions. It's not that the Lions weren't good enough to beat the 49ers. In fact, the Lions proved to be better than the 49ers, and it was just bad decision making and execution why they lost. Whether Detroit Lions fans want to agree with that explanation or not, it just seems like that became the general consensus, was that the Lions lost that game in the playoffs more than the 49ers won that game. And that's my personal opinion as well. That's when I watched that game and the game was over, I left that saying the Lions lost that game, the 49ers did not win that game. And so it's just so interesting now to continue that momentum. And now I think a lot of times teams reach it to like an NFC Championship game or a Super Bowl or whatever it may be, and then the following years they just can't recapture that, right? And you see this with a lot of teams over the years, right? This has happened many years, whether they've won the Super Bowl, whether they lose, they just can't get back there. They can't get back to that level. And then most recently, it could either be the Cincinnati Bengals, the Eagles, the Rams, and the Rams even won the Super Bowl. And I know that there are some other factors at play, like injuries and age of other players and stuff like that, but it's still a thing that happens. And I think that's why the Lions are in such a unique situation, because sometimes when you lose, whether it be the NFC Championship game, Super Bowl, whatever it may be, you lost despite your best effort. You did everything you could, and you threw out all the punches, all the action. You called the game to the best of your abilities, both offensive, defensively. Your quarterback didn't just have a terrible game, and your running back wasn't hobbled by, a high ankle sprain or whatever it may be. Like, you just did everything you could, and unfortunately, it just was not enough. The other team just beat you. And that is when teams get deflated. That's when it's just like, man, we did everything we could, and it just wasn't enough. And yeah, the coaching staff and the front office and all that, they still try to keep everyone, going and saying, we were so close, we're going to get better, this, that, and the third. And to me, that's not what happened with the Lions. The Lions were playing unbelievable. They proved to be there. They proved to be a top team in the NFL. And then it was their own inexperience and immaturity. And I don't say that meanly. It's just what happens, right? Once upon a time, Patrick Mahomes was inexperienced and immature as well. And now, after going to the Super Bowl so many times, he knows exactly what he's doing. And the Lions just did not have that. They did not have that experience and that maturity. And I think because of that, they failed themselves, which is actually a great place to be in. Because the Detroit Lions are an incredibly smart and well-run organization. And now they also have the consistency from last season into this season. It's not like it's like they had to get a new OC and a new this and a new that and had to get rid of some great weapons. Like, that's not necessarily what happened. Obviously, it's not the identical team, but it's going to be the large base of that team. And they're going to, I have no reason to believe otherwise, that they're going to learn from their mistakes, that they're going to grow as a franchise, that they're no longer thinking themselves as, hey, everyone doubts us, they don't think we can do this, to, we belong here. We belong here. We have nothing to prove to these other teams in the media. In fact, these other teams have something to prove to us. They have to prove that they're better than us, not the other way around, right? Like, it's just like next season, and I don't think the Lions play the Chiefs this season. I could be wrong, but I don't believe they do. But like, if let's say they were to play again, the Chiefs have to prove that they can beat the Lions, not that the Lions are good enough to compete with the Super Bowl team. That's done now. That's in the past. And in a way, that's kind of what Jared Goff talked about on a podcast about a month or so ago, where he was talking to them about the media and saying how negative the Lions media is, and he said, "Hey, we have a good team now. Like I know it's been awful for years, but we are good now. Like we can be positive." And I'm not speaking on the negativity of the media, because it just seems like many teams have negative medias, especially a lot of the major franchises like New York and Philly and Detroit. Like, it's just these main big cities that take their football very seriously, their sports as a whole very seriously. It's a passionate fan base. But I do think what Jared Goff is saying is correct in the sense of, like, we are here. We belong to be here. The media now, just wait when we get closer and closer and people are making, more serious predictions and stuff like that. Like, they're not going to go into the playoffs and say, oh, Detroit Lions are fool's gold. Jared Goff's not good enough. Dan Campbell is just a dude. Ben Johnson is, I don't know, is he a good OC? Is he a genius, or did he just get lucky? Like, they're not going to be making those statements anymore. They know who the Detroit Lions are. I have no reason to believe that the Lions are now going to fumble the ball, and not be a legitimately highly competitive team this season. The only drawback is, or the only con you can say, is that lots of teams are good now, right? And again, I know the Lions fans don't want to hear this, but the Packers are going to be really good. The Eagles should be really good. The 49ers should be really good. The Rams should be better. Well, it depends. The Rams are a question mark to me as well, I guess, because of what's going on defensively. But they're offensively, they should be better. And then, of course, you do have the Texans and the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Bills. Like, it's all legitimate things. And if the Bengals are actually healthy and Joe Burrow is healthy, they're going to be competitive. So it's definitely not going to be a walk in the park for the Lions. But the Lions are without a doubt a top team. And in terms of the direct question of who's the next hot team, I think I'm not into making definitive answers and saying this is the best team in the NFL. That's not who I am. I put teams in groups. But to doubt that the Detroit Lions aren't a next hot team and won't be the topic of the national media week after week after week, I mean, like, they have to. They as long as they are playing well and not just obviously playing awful, the Detroit Lions should absolutely be one of the few teams that ends up dominating the headlines week after week after week on all of these, shows like First Take, First Things First, The Herd, and all of that. Anything shy of that would be a tragedy, because the Detroit Lions deserve to be talked about regularly, like they are the Kansas City Chiefs, the Ravens, the Eagles, the Cowboys, any of these blue blood teams that have been, successful for years and years and years. I think the Lions have officially arrived at that party. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Detroit Lions being the next hot team in the NFC? And do you think this year we are going to finally see the Lions get actual respect from the national media, outside, of course, the Lions fans? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.